Hi, Brian. Thank you for your
Hey,
time this afternoon.
it's my pleasure, and thanks very much, Bhumi.
Perfect. So we're in the new year and we're kicking start with this topic that is really close to my heart, which is diversity and inclusion for external workforces. So why don't we do a quick intro? I'll go
Yeah.
first.
hmm
So I'm Bhumi, founder and CEO at InteriMarket, your total contingent workforce solution. And today I'm pleased to have Brian on the hot seat to discuss the diversity and inclusion topic, especially when it concerns external workforce. Disclaimer, all views shared by Brian are personal. So Brian, take it away. Tell us more about you and your book.
Yeah, sure. I can introduce myself. You know a lot more than me about contingent workforce, so yeah, let's see how it goes. But yeah, I'm Brian Ballantyne. I work as a diversity inclusion program manager at a large tech company. Quite recently, though, I mean that's just for the past year. I did 20 years working in product marketing, but I always volunteered and I always cared about this area. So finally, I've made it my day job. So yeah, really enjoying doing that. I've just published a book, as you mentioned. It's called Confessions of a Working Father. So one of the
Wow.
yeah, thank you. One of the challenges about diversity and inclusion is that it can sometimes be a lot of echo chambers. It's rooms of women or kind of minorities just talking to themselves about things that they already know, and a lot of and they say, well, where are the where are all the men, or where are the white men? And it's like, well, they weren't really invited and don't really feel safe, being part of the
Wow.
conversation. So I think, I know, like working father is kind of like an ironic phrase, just to kind of get all working parents into the conversation, and men might not attend an event about gender diversity, but they might attend one about flexible working so they can be there for their kids or for their older parents, for example. So yeah, I just started blogging some stories and some experiences on LinkedIn, and then I did a few blogs for websites, and by the end I had enough space for like an ebook and a paperback. So yeah, I just published it. It's not a blockbuster so far, but and all the money's going to charity. So anyway,
Oh,
something
wow.
fun to do.
What charity is it going to?
Oh, it's a charity called Winston's Wish. It's a charity for bereaved children.
Oh,
So,
wow.
no, it's just echoing some of the experiences from my own childhood, and just
Mm.
the point is not for me to make any money from it, but just to start the conversation. And so, anything financial just goes to that charity to help other children.
That's fantastic, Brian. I'll be
hmm
sharing the links to
Oh,
your
cool!
book and the charity, etc., as details you sent me at the bottom of this video description as
Wonderful.
well. Thank you so much.
Thank
So,
you.
Brian, thank you for sharing with us what you've been up to, what you've done with your career, especially entering into this senior role where you're now starting to engage and talk about this topic. So
hmm
let's just, straight away jump into it. What do you think currently is the state of D&I today? And where do we stand as not only individuals, but as businesses? I mean, I may have a biased view because I've been a contingent worker most of my career. But two people can't be bad at the same time. Two people can't be wrong, right? So take it away. Like, tell us, where do we stand today?
Well, as you said at the start, I'm only speaking from my personal experience. I'm not speaking on behalf of the industry or my company.
Of course.
And I think that companies are at different points of the journey. So, what I've noticed even like 10 years ago was that some companies, people like Accenture, McKinsey, and some of the big financial institutions, insurance companies, they're really ahead of the game. I mean, they can't afford to miss out on anyone who's going to bring in the next big deal. So,
Mm,
whatever you look like, whatever your choices are. So I think there's some companies like that who are really kind of ahead. Sometimes there's been regulations around equal pay, and it's, for example, in the UK around equality in that way. But there's many other companies where it's kind of still early in the journey, where there's a big focus on gender diversity, and I think this is where a lot of the focus is. Obviously, women aren't a minority; they're the majority of our human population and the world's customers. So there's a big
mm,
business imperative there, and I think most people know a woman in their life. I mean, probably they were born to one, so we kind of should have some kind of like personal connection with this topic. I think I'm seeing a lot more about LGBT diversity with colleagues in the US. It's more about, we have I don't know, people of color and different ethnicities, and there's more about accessibility. I mean, I guess even 15 years ago, there was quite a lot about accessibility for people, whether that's physical or different kind of dimensions. But
mm,
so I think there's all of this, but at the same time, it's, when you mentioned around diversity for contingent workers, it wasn't top of mind for me. I'll be honest with you. I don't think this is really getting a lot of focus, but I think that, no, I think it's super important. And now I think about it, I know quite a lot of people who are contingent workers. I hadn't really identified them as that as such. But then you're right, there's a big challenge where if they're not the full-time employees going through the process, or they're not treated the same way, or they're not included in things, how do you make sure there's kind of inclusion and diversity there? So that's kind of how I see things. How about you?
Yeah, so I think when we were initially speaking a few months ago, I was talking about my experience as a contractor and an interim. And it was really, for me, I was very fortunate because I had some brilliant managers and teams I worked for. But I think as a contingent worker, it really depends on the team and the manager you work with or the company you go into, because it is not a company-wide effort. So, even in some of the best teams and companies, I would not be invited to a certain things purely because I'm an interim and I would finish my contract in 6 months or whatever. So they didn't see me as the long term, which I understand. If there are confidential things and stuff, I understand. But as I said, I was very fortunate that I had teams and managers that really did include me most of the times, whereas I know plenty of my colleagues who do not feel that way. They in fact feel that they are almost seen as a burden on the team as a contractor or an interim, especially businesses where the culture is a bit this is us versus you sort of a culture. So I think this is a brilliant opportunity for us to talk about this, and also for businesses to tackle the challenges to really retain this external workforce a bit more loyally. But that's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I see that as well. And I think as what they talk about now, sometimes it's good intentions. It could be that good manager who's who thinks to invite you and maybe takes a risk on inviting you to a party where other managers might play it by the book, or maybe they may, as you say, there may be more. It's in group, out group. It's us and them kind of approach. I've certainly been on good teams. Probably maybe a decade ago at Vodafone, there's a really good team which had a real mix of independent contractors or contingent workforce and full-time employees, and frankly the contingent workforce was doing the best job and doing a lot of our kind of product development and back-end development. And there really wasn't, and when I joined the team I didn't even realize people had different contractual statuses. Everyone, it was just a team and everyone was just doing a great job, and it never really occurred to me that people were different. Everyone came to the kind of the launch party. Everyone was doing the work together, so it would have been really surprising to exclude people.
Yeah.
But I know in other situations, when someone I know, our kids are at the same school, and she's kind of now in reception in the mailroom in this company. I said, "Oh, what's it like at that company?" And she's like, "I do not work for that company. I work for this service company." And it was almost like it'd been drilled into her that she had to say she didn't work for the company. And I thought it was kind of weird, because you're in the building, you're with the same people, you're sharing the same space, and there's a kind of sharing that atmosphere. And to kind of feel like you can't say you work for the company, it's kind of dehumanizing, I feel, in some ways. And so I know some companies are kind of nervous. There was a big legal case with Microsoft in the past where there was a big class action, I think. But I think that, that's one extreme. There should be, kind of mechanisms in place that we kind of, you're made to feel like part of the team. You're doing all the work, and maybe you're not in the company for the whole, for 20 years. But I think, look at workforces these days, and with Generation Z and millennials working, people aren't expecting to work in companies for that long.
Yeah.
And so whether you're contingent or full-time, you may only be there for a year and a half anyway. So I think we need to kind of change our mindset in terms of how we think about the human experience at work.
Absolutely. And I think there is a huge shift and drive coming in terms of benefits and looking at all sorts of things for this sort of external workforce as well. So I'm not only participating in certain conversations, one of them becoming, the declassification of these workers so we can classify them correctly, but also looking at what's coming out of the government or what's coming out of businesses that want to really support them, which is brilliant, right? So that leads me on to a question for you, Brian, then. So you've now written a book, you've got this huge career experience, etc. So are you looking at portfolio career in the future for yourself? And if not, then why not?
Yeah, I certainly am. And I think I'm already doing that. So, through my kind of voluntary activities in diversity, I'm now a board member. There's a group here in Luxembourg called Women in Digital Empowerment, which is a non-profit. It works with the Ministry of Equal Opportunity. So I'm a board member there for the past year and a half.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that's really great. I'm a part of the Institute of Directors here as well in Luxembourg. This is more pro bono about looking at board composition in terms of not just gender but also age of board members, and looking at getting more variety there. I also work with the British Chamber of Commerce. So these are all pro bono things at the moment, but I kind of really like that. Being part of these boards, and maybe it could turn into something in the future. That's my retirement plan, is to be on a few boards, have a nice time. But I think it's really cross-pollinating. Things that in all of these different groups and your full-time job, you get ideas or you see different perspectives. It's kind of refreshing to kind of be with people who aren't in the same company.
Yeah.
And I think as well, I think if you look at, I was talking to someone about this the other day. They were saying that with the increase in kind of flexible and remote working, there's actually fewer part-time jobs. And so companies now over the last decade have realized that they don't need to offer part-time. They can just offer like work from home, which, to be honest, I mean, my kids are a bit older now, but when you've got like a crying baby, you can't be on video calls. You can't be there all the time. You've got to, and you wouldn't want to dedicate your time. So I think there's a big issue that we're not offering as many part-time jobs. And so a lot of people are looking at freelancing and contracting and different ways of fitting work around their life commitments. I know people who've got their partner's disabled or their parents are very sick and they need to be other places and maybe for a few years they need to be flexible in how they work, but obviously they've still got to pay their mortgage. So I think we need to look at really flexibly at how we do this. And I think as you say, portfolio, career, or different ways of working really need to be explored. Because the current model is just not working for everyone at the moment.
Yeah, and that was something I wanted to ask. I mean, if you were to advise of a model, or if you were to see something, what would be fit for people, like you say, in flexible situations? They have a permanent career, they need something flexible for a few years, or they just want to dip their toes into contracting. And then they want to have that stability or that confidence that they can go back into it. Because, usually people that contract for a long time are sort of, they won't be hired for permanent jobs after 5-10 years of contracting. And so that needs to change, right? That mindset. And so what do you think, and what do you suggest as a model that people can start to adopt that want to dip in and out of contingent and portfolio career?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I'm definitely not an expert on this, and you know more than I do. So I'll just say what's top of mind for me. And I think you're right. I think there's this kind of established mindset where you start off with maybe as a contractor and you seek to kind of get full-time employment. I was just talking to someone today who's looking for an internship at our company and was kind of holding back from applying for a full-time position and saw it as a progression to go from an internship to a full-time position. But I don't know if that's necessarily true. What I've seen over the years is that people have been full-time employees and they've got great technical skills, and they've realized that they can quit the company, set up as a freelancer and come back and do, for the same pay that they'll get in a year. They can work for 6 months and they can travel the rest of the year. So I think it's building up your value. I think something that's quite key at the moment that I'm thinking about is trying not to be needed, but to be valued. And I think that we need to get away from this kind of availability, being there at your desk just in case. We're not firefighters. We don't have to be there just in case. We can kind of plan for the most part our work and get it done. And sometimes, maybe, I mean, life's short. We want to enjoy it. We don't want to be sat in an office the whole time. So if we can travel or do other things or spend time with family situations, and that works as a freelance model, and I think that's great. I think there are challenges, as you say, because then you're not seen by the company as being loyal or pursuing a career with them. But I think that's the sign of the times. And I think that's where we are. But I've definitely seen that. So let's not think about you have to be a contractor, then you get a full-time. Maybe you can even think about getting a full-time job, prove your value, and then you're in a position to negotiate. Well, actually, I'm going to go freelance. I've seen that a couple of times. Working with this, it's like, oh, I thought you left. It's like, yeah, I'm a freelancer now. I'm getting paid more. And so yeah, I think let's shake it up a bit. I don't think there's a set. Yeah,
I like that. Let's shake it up a little bit. That's definitely something I love. Excellent. So in conclusion, I think from what I see, I would say that businesses are spending a lot of money on repeated agency costs, etc., by just not retaining or gaining this loyalty. Like you said, somebody could be a permanent colleague and come back, or even if they were a contractor, if they were just treated right and they were sort of included in certain activities or made to feel like a team, they would always come back. They would remember that manager, they would keep in touch and stuff like that. So I think as the growth of contingent workforce continues, there is a huge opportunity here for businesses and individuals to prove their value. And it's maybe about time that businesses start looking at this talent pool and consider them as part of their total people agenda, because I think that's something that is missing out. I mean, every time I talk to an HR director, they're still talking about their people agenda, which is their employees and graduates and even apprentices now, but they still don't consider contingent workers. So I feel that there's this huge opportunity now, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think, as you say, it's quite transactional. It's like, well, we've got our employees, which are our loyal, brand ambassadors, and we've got people who we bring in to do certain tasks. But I don't agree with that kind of binary approach to it.
Mm,
People who come in, they're here and probably feel like they're part of the company as well, and happy to kind of take on board and learn from the values. At the same time, full-time employees, they may only be here for a year and a half, and I think that
mm.
previous generations who've maybe worked 20, 30 years at the same company. I mean, I worked 12 years at Vodafone, so who am I to talk? But I think
Mhm.
there's an expectation. It's like, well, this is a company, and it's not the Quaker days. It's not the days where you work for the same company for your whole life, just like your parents did.
Yeah.
I know it's flexibility, and we're kind of quite mobile now internationally, and in how we work. And I think we need to kind of take a look at starting with what does work mean, and it's kind of delivering things. It's being a group of people that's kind of inclusive, and it doesn't necessarily need to be like everyone sitting in the same office. There's things
Correct.
like working styles, or as you say, contingent workers. And I think you're right. Like finance teams will look at, say, this is your headcount plan, and obviously contractors may be more expensive, so you can't have any, or we've got a ban on that, or it's ridiculous. And then it seems like an inflexible way of doing things. Just repeating one year to the next. This is your headcount. This is your variable and fixed work headcount. I think that we should, as you say,
Absolutely.
let's shake it up a bit and think, well, if we started with a blank piece of paper for the 21st century, would we do it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, when it comes to costs, contingent workers do not cost more than employees because they do not get bonuses, they do not get, a lot of the things. So I think there is a lot of misconception as well when it comes to hiring contingent
Hmm.
teams, or having solutions where they've got access to these agile contingent teams handy. But Brian, this was brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me and
Thank
talking
you.
about this. I'm really looking forward to sharing this video. It will be shared in full and in chunks as well. And I'm looking forward to also, adding the description to your book and your charity. So thank you for joining us
Yeah,
today.
it's been my absolute pleasure, and feel free to share the outtakes as well.
Fantastic.
It's
Will do.
been really fun chatting with you. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers. Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye. Bye.